Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil and the world since 2009 and now in podcast format. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American living in Brazil for many years and known for business networking, and I'm talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest is Daniel Rosenberg, and he's joining us from Hangzhou, China. Daniel is bilingual, a data-driven and customer-oriented communications professional specializing in content and marketing with an emphasis on developer and media relations, campaign planning, creative copy, SEO, and marketing analytics. He is currently at Alibaba, one of the world's largest tech companies, supporting Ant Financial, Alipay, and Luohan Academy. I met Daniel through LinkedIn, where I saw one of his entertaining and highly informative videos about financial and health services in China. So with that, Daniel, hello and welcome to Talk to Brazil Business Connection.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. I've been seeing you and watching you on the videos. But before we get to the videos, tell our listeners a little bit about your life's journey. Because I saw on LinkedIn you went from the United States to Moscow, then to China, and there you have a Chinese Proficiency test level of 6. And the videos I saw you running around making videos in the streets of China.
Yeah, so before I started doing these videos in China, I guess my journey to China, to put a long story short, I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C., the capital of the U.S., and during undergraduate, I had a semester abroad in Russia. And I started learning the language there and wanted to have another semester abroad. However, Russia, the university in Russia that I was attending, didn't offer the credit I needed to graduate. But Luohan University in Hong Kong did. I went to Hong Kong and I fell in love with Asia. And, after graduating, I went back to China, went back to D.C. in around 2015, and then back to China in 2017 and started working for Alibaba. So just by chance, I landed myself in Hong Kong and fell in love with Asia, fell in love with Chinese culture. Ended up doing my graduate degree at Nanjing University here, where I can't say I mastered the language, but yes, I do have a HSK 6 level proficiency, which is one of the highest. I get by.
I think I saw that and heard that on the videos. Obviously, I don't speak Chinese. I don't speak Mandarin myself, but from your interaction, it seemed pretty fluent. People very receptive to what you're saying and answering. So, but let me see, once you got there and you learned the language and you said you got there and started working for Alibaba, obviously language is important. How much importance is learning the language for anybody to go to China and work there?
Well, everybody has their own experiences when doing business in China. I happen to think that learning the language when you live in any culture is a prerequisite. Mm-hmm. There's a lot, I guess you could say, lost in translation a lot of the time. And knowing the language just gives you somewhat of a competitive edge. And also you can better understand your teammates, your customers, or whoever you're trying to do business with.
Well, even in the people in the streets, like you were out there walking around doing your videos.
Yeah, or calling a cab or doing anything. Knowing the language in China makes life a lot easier.
And people, when you start speaking Chinese, what do they think? How do people look at you?
the immediate reaction is usually somewhat surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in China, it's a very warm and receptive culture. So they might end up just chatting your ear off or asking you a million questions.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And usually they're not necessarily, for example, I've been asked how much I make. I mean, some of these questions in the U.S. or in other Western cultures might be frowned upon, but not in China. So I think
not in Brazil either. When I first came here, that was pretty much how it went. The same way. It seems that obviously you said the United States and Western culture is one thing, but once you're out and in another culture, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and I think the same adage holds true: when in Rome, do as Romans do. So you got to adapt, and just makes life a lot easier when you totally embrace the culture.
Well, together with the culture, and now the videos that I saw, you created what is called Dan's Digital Playground. What's that all about?
Right. So basically, right now I work for Luohan Academy, which is a research organization created by Jack Ma, Ant Group, and Alibaba that explores how digital technology is shaping society. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to share kind of China's digital economy and experience with digital technology with a global audience. And with that, Dan's Digital Playground was born. Basically, the idea is to show this transformation that China is undergoing and has undergone for almost 5 years now, which is this transformation of mobile payments, mobile wallets, everything here is digitization, whether it be the entertainmentification of e-commerce and shopping. Everything relies on your phone.
Right.
And I think that's the one key thing that I wanted to share with a global audience. I think it's been at first when everyone thought of Chinese technology, they thought of what's called copy back to China, where China might take an idea from the U.S. or the West and then copy it and make it work in China. Mm-hmm. I think more and more that's no longer the case.
I think now everybody outside wants to copy China.
Right. It's Chinese-born innovation, and it's usually solving some sort of problem. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest case of this would be the advent of Alipay, which solved a very basic problem, which is that we needed two people to trust each other when buying something on Taobao, which is China's really first e-commerce platform. Mm-hmm. And then Alipay was born, which is a mobile wallet. And for example, another problem, now everything you can pay by QR code. And that's also and these are technological innovations that are currently happening that are solving a problem in society.
Right.
And I think that's one of the cases. I think that's what you need for a really innovative business plan.
Yeah, other people I've interviewed specifically on China and the technology and what you just mentioned, one of the persons was Renata Tilbo, who is a Brazilian living there, been successful for many years. One of the things that she mentioned on an interview was like 70%, the Chinese don't use money anymore. She said that like 70% of the persons in China pay everything in some type of a mechanism like you just said. It's not, the transactions are digital. They have no money.
Yeah, I think cash is more a formality these days. Everything is done via digital wallet, and there's the two biggest in China. Well, I'd say the biggest is Alipay.
Mm-hmm. But you're from the United States, and you know that when I go there, like if you don't have a quarter in your pocket, sometimes you can't even go to the restroom. So what you're saying there in China, it's all you hold your smartphone and pay everything.
It is absolutely hold your smartphone and pay everything. And now in some cases, you don't even need a smartphone. You just need a watch.
A watch?
Yeah, because, you have a QR code. It shows up on the watch. You put it, they scan it, and then you've paid.
And that's it.
And then that's it. Everything's deducted from your bank account or your Alibaba account. And I think in the beauty of it is that all of these things work together. In one of my latest videos, it was on a new Alipay product or semi-new product, which is called Xianghubao, which literally means mutual aid. And that
was the healthcare. That's healthcare,
right?
I saw that. That's amazing.
The idea is to give protection to not the highest to those who don't necessarily have the greatest access to healthcare providers or insurance. And the idea is to give them a cheap way to get into a program. And it succeeds at that. And I have to say relatively well. You don't need any money to get healthcare protection with Xianghubao.
Well, I think on the video, you showed $1. I think you used that as an example. $1 was equal to 40,000 something.
Exactly. So it's not that complicated, but when sometimes explaining it is so I encourage everyone to watch the video, but basically it's a system where whoever gets sick, for example, in that time period, mm-hmm. their bill is split amongst all of the users of Xianghubao or mutual aid protection. So
a collaborative health system amongst the people. It's a
collaborative health system that's for the people, by the people. But this is one of these transformative approaches to a problem that has existed in society for quite a while.
No, and it still exists. I think it's one of the major problems worldwide. What we've seen now, unfortunately, with the pandemic, how healthcare or the lack of has affected the world's population.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic, because another interesting thing that I think the pandemic highlighted is our need for everyone, whether you're an individual, a company, or even governments, to increase their digitization.
Right.
One of the segments we did was what we call digital coupons or digital consumer coupons. Mm-hmm. So that because everyone has Alipay and other mobile payments in China, it is very easy for the government to issue these coupons to encourage spending.
Right.
Now, can you imagine a government amid the pandemic issuing, for example, a stipend that might otherwise take a day or two by mail? They can get it immediately on their mobile wallet or their e-wallets within seconds.
Well, I want to just bring you up to speed on how what you just said was so unfortunate here in Brazil. And the unfortunate is that like 40% of the Brazilian population doesn't have access to a bank account. They're non-banking. And the same thing here in Brazil, the government's offering monthly stipends, started offering monthly stipends really to help the persons in more need survive. But unfortunately, because of that, these persons had to stand in a line, physically wait for one of the government banks, go in to be able to get the money, and then take that money and do whatever they wanted with it, go out and buy things. And it was exactly one of those weeks that I saw that video that you showed. And it was amazing in that of people just showing that coupon coming to their phone and, either paying their bills or buying groceries or doing whatever they wanted to do. And instantly. So it's not, 2 days later. Here, the government was setting up payment plans that were weekly, based on your birth date. Then you would go on week 1, and another birth date would be week 2. It was just a massive confusion. And then they saw that they were paying people that didn't exist, or overpaying people, or underpaying. So it was just havoc.
And that's where I think digital technology can really help society. It's not just the higher class that has access to these tools. Mm-hmm. For example, the unbanked population. You don't necessarily need a bank account. All you need is a mobile phone.
Right.
And that's the beauty of the Alibaba ecosystem and Alipay's ecosystem, is that you just need a phone and you can get a loan. You can get other services that can help you start a business or make your business more efficient. And you can do this all on the tip of your fingertips with your cell phone.
No, but when you say if you have your smartphone, you can get a loan, obviously you need some type of a credit reference, don't you? Or is that already within a system, or you don't even need that?
Well, the idea would be that obviously you need some sort of credit system, but Alipay in its own right creates a credit system for you using AI algorithms and a whole bunch of other tech that I am not smart enough to necessarily talk about. Mm-hmm. But what happens is you get a credit rating, and then that is then used to prove or gives you the collateral that you would otherwise need to get a loan. So what we're basically saying is that your information that you're creating by using Alipay, by making payments, mm-hmm. is then your collateral. It's sort of this, we often think that the data we create, we never are able to capitalize on. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it depends on the system. And we research this at Luohan Academy, but you can think of yourself as a data producer, and when you produce this data, it's then coming back to you through the form of different benefits, maybe a higher credit rating, for example.
Okay. So actually, you're being rewarded for just being part of a system.
Yes. And for those who, for example, the unbanked populations, it can be very enabling because you don't have credit, you don't have access to a bank, but if you have your cell phone, you can create your credit. And the system will slowly understand your spending habits. I think one of the big future in tech would be financial literacy, where we have an app or something that can teach you how to better spend your money, what you need to invest in, so that you can become more financially independent. And if it's all available on your cell phone, well, that's quite empowering.
It seems like worldwide, even here in Brazil, what most people have is a cell phone. That's the technology. That's the access to technology here. And even highlighted more because of the pandemic. That persons who have children in school, everybody's sort of sharing a smartphone if they don't have any other mechanism to try to live their daily life and educate themselves and basically do anything.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, the pandemic in itself has highlighted and somewhat exacerbated the need for digitization. I think what you've seen throughout the world is that the only companies that are thriving during this time are those that are heavily into e-commerce.
Right.
And those are the ones that have a fighting chance and are even becoming more powerful.
Right. Well, that's the same situation here in Brazil. But everything that you just mentioned, all of this existed before the pandemic. So none of this was just developed because of it. So the intelligence, the systems that was there, the Chinese had their smartphone and were interacting and paying all last year. The pandemic just highlighted everything and made, from what I see from where we are, it seems that the challenges of the pandemic and the response to it from a Chinese standpoint was certainly helped because of all this technology.
I would very much agree. I think the pandemic showed that China's reliance on digital tools was not a hindrance, but a positive. Mm-hmm. It showed that, I was here during the pandemic, and when socially distancing and in quarantining, we were able to access and get food quite easily through online e-commerce platforms. One is called Hema, the other is called Ulama, and both we were able to get groceries delivered to us. It made life much easier and more convenient.
And you were able to work.
Yeah, well, we didn't even get into now we're back at the office already in China. But yes, we used remote tools. I think that's another thing that the pandemic has shown is that we can use these remote tools just as efficient. Many companies have already instituted forever work from home policies.
Right. Well, I saw recently in one of the videos you were actually interviewing some of your colleagues, and that seemed to be very up to date and seemed to be very right now. So that's real. That's not something that you put together with artificial intelligence to make people think life is normal. You were really sitting down talking to people.
So the artificial intelligence is a very interesting subject. So in that respect, we at Alibaba, there is an academy called Luohan Academy. So you can think about Alibaba as having two somewhat very important academies. One is Luohan Academy, and the other is Luohan Academy. Mm-hmm. Luohan is where I work.
All right.
But Luohan Academy, they are investigating and researching all of these emerging technologies, whether it be AI, quantum computing, holographic shopping. It's really an interesting place to go and visit. Now, Luohan Academy is researching how those emerging technologies might impact our society in order to create a more inclusive and equal world. Now, when we went there, we were interested in how Luohan had shifted gears from researching this emerging technology to using this emerging technology to help the world's fight against COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And we specifically talked to three different kind of teams. One team did AI CT scans, which basically looked at CT scans and then used an AI algorithm to tell if the subject had COVID COVID-19 or not. And then this algorithm was then given to hospitals throughout China, even in Japan, I think they were using it, and in Indonesia. Another one did the same thing, but for the genetic sequence of COVID-19. And the last one was a delivery robot that would deliver food to patients using this robot, so that no one would had any chance of being infected.
Right.
So going back to your kind of a question long time ago, yes, China used varying technological means to fight COVID-19, from the very most advanced technology in AI and robotics to digital payments.
And from what you're saying and what I think I saw on the videos, everything you just said is sort of like within the same block. It's all sort of close together in the same campus. Is that true? Or is that the impression that I had?
I would say we're all over the world, but in Hangzhou, there are three main campuses. One is Ant Group, formerly known as Ant Financial. The other is Alibaba, and then there's Alibaba Cloud. And within Alibaba, there's all these other sub-business units. And we're all scattered throughout Hangzhou, but for the most part, every business unit is headquartered here. So it's very easy to go visit. And I think that's what makes Luohan Academy so special, is that we're researching this stuff. We're researching this technological change that is brought on by digital technology, but we're also very close to the practice of it.
Right.
So, and that's really important when designing products that we hope can make the world a better place.
Well, what you've done, and I guess what I would say, is you've created a municipal mindset, taking everything together, what you just said, in favor of artificial intelligence and in favor of the future.
Well, I think one thing that we are very adamant about is that, like any technological change, there are good and there is bad. The key for everyone around the world is how to embrace the good while minimizing the bad, like any type of technological trade-off.
Right.
Some technologies might cause unemployment in some regions, but how do we minimize that? Do we have to retrain? And these are the questions that we hope to answer in the future. And if I can do a little through my show to show that, sorry, that's kind of a tongue twister. If I can do anything through Dan's digital playground to show how to embrace digital technology the right way for a more inclusive and equal society, then I've done a good job.
Well, I think you have, and I want to congratulate you on that. And unfortunately, we're running to the end of our time, but I want to ask you one more question because of what I saw on the videos. Are you an artist?
I dabble in. Why would you ask that?
You're very comfortable in what you do. The videos themselves are, as I said, they're highly informative, but they're also, I don't want to use the word funny. They're entertaining.
Well, I can't take all the credit for that. This is my first time in front of the camera. I had long been somewhat of an amateur videographer, but this is definitely my first time doing any type of thing on television. And, I think that's another goal of mine through the series, is to handle, these are very complex and difficult questions that we're investigating.
Right.
And if I can add a bit of humor while doing so, I think, that makes it more digestible.
No, it does. And I have to be honest, I'm not a nerd. I don't think I'm a techie, but you are able to, at least for me, you were able to explain some very complex platforms and ideas into something, like you just said, very digestible and interesting and entertaining to watch. So I want to congratulate you again and keep it up.
I appreciate it. And I'd love to come back on the podcast whenever you have a slot.
No, we will. I want to, because as we evolve in this, there's just so much happening so quickly. And part of what you mentioned, some of the things of the training, one of my objectives is to a younger audience and even to the older audience, people need to retrain themselves. It's just like, well, this is changing everything, but you need to wake up early and do something about it. And that's learning. And digital learning, engagement, understanding these concepts is fundamental. Otherwise, we're just going to create a more illiterate society. And that's not the objective for anybody.
Yeah, I think I've said about 1 million times, but you've hit the nail on the head. We need to increase digital literacy so people don't fear the oncoming transformation, but can embrace it and all it has to offer.
And I feel that personally because I started Talk to Brazil's a radio program in 2009 when I'd go out and say I have an internet radio program. I was talking, actually nobody understood that. Even today, recently, saying I have a podcast. Most people don't even understand what it is. But for me, I've been digital. I've been remote for more than 10 years. And we're together. You're getting ready to go to bed. I'm still getting ready to have lunch. We've generated 30-some minutes of a conversation, which has been fantastic. And we've never met.
No, this is, for all the audience out there, this is our first time talking to each other, but I've got to say that it was a fantastic time.
Well, equally, I'm sure, and it was great meeting you, talking with you, and I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy that, and we'll be back, okay?
All right, I thank you very much.
And again, thank you for sharing your time with our listeners, and for our listeners, you can find more about Daniel Rosenberg, and his name is Daniel, Daniel, and last name is Rosenberg. You'll find him on LinkedIn, or on the Luohan Academy YouTube channel, where you'll be able to see all of these different videos that we talked about. I will also be posting that on the talktobrazil.com site. So I'd like to thank you, our audience, and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. And more about them on their site, www.focusmi.com. And again, visit our website, talktobrazil.com, and that's Brazil with a Z, to find our previous shows of Talk to Brazil, which are also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and many more. So remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.